My name is Emily and I'm from Boulder, Colorado. 2 years ago, something happened that was so weird, I still can't fully process it. I rarely talk about this, mostly because I don't understand what I saw, but I thought this might be a good place to share it. I was 29 and had recently moved in with my friend Claire after a horrible breakup and losing the apartment I had been in. Claire lives in a house that her parents own in North Boulder, and she let me rent out one side of it that is basically a mother-in-law suite. It had a large bedroom with its own bathroom, a separate entrance door, and the whole thing was split from the rest of the house by the kitchen, which we shared. Next door to Claire's house, there was a woman who lived alone named Edith. I had only met her one time, but she was the sweetest elderly woman you could ever meet who had to be in her late 80s. We would see her son and what I'm guessing were other members of his family stop by at least once a week to bring her groceries and mow the lawn and help her with whatever. About a month after I moved in, there was a night where I had covered a later shift for someone at work and I got home around 11:30. I took a shower as soon as I got home, and when I was done, I opened the bathroom window to let the steam out. That bathroom window looked directly at Edith's dining room window next door, which if you looked into, you could see her table and a sliding glass door that went out to her back patio. When I opened the bathroom window, I happened to notice that the light was on in Edith's dining room, which didn't seem normal because it was so late. When I looked into her house, I saw her standing at the sliding glass door, right at the glass with her face almost touching it, and she was just staring outside. I thought she might be on the phone because I could see her mouth moving and she was making small hand gestures, but she wasn't holding anything and there was no one else there. I only saw her doing this for a minute, then she left the room and the light went off. It was weird, but that was it. About a week after that, I woke up to go to the bathroom and again could see her dining room light was on through my window. I had to open mine to see anything because the glass was frosted, but when I did, she was there in the same spot again and standing at the glass door. I could see her talking and moving her hands like the first time, but this time it looked more like she was arguing with someone. I couldn't hear anything, but you could tell by the way she was moving her arms around that she was upset. I watched her do this for a solid 5 minutes, but then like before, she walked out of the room and the light went off. That time I told Claire about it the next day and we both thought it could be some kind of dementia or something similar, and we decided not to do anything unless it got worse since her family was clearly involved with her care. I also didn't want her family to think that I was spying or watching her late at night. Just 2 nights after that, I saw it happen a third time. Edith was standing at the sliding glass door and talking again, but this time there was something different. I don't know if it was me still being half asleep or my eyes were still adjusting, but it looked like there was someone, or more accurately something, standing on the other side of the glass on her patio. It was so hard to tell because it was dark, but it looked like a single dark figure and the shape was not normal. I don't know what it looked like, but it did not look like a normal human being. It only took me 30 seconds to know for sure that it wasn't me and something was actually standing there because I could see it moving and Edith just stood there staring at it and talking to it. I'm not going to lie, it was a disturbing thing to see, but I couldn't look away. I leaned forward and put my forehead against the screen to get a better view of what was going on, and then the most startling and terrifying thing I have ever experienced happened. Edith turned her head and looked directly at me. This wasn't like she slowly looked around the room and happened to see me looking out my window. I swear she instantly looked me right in the eyes, and I got this feeling like something had told her to do it. It was the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. As soon as she did that, I physically jumped away from the window and my stomach felt like it was in my throat. I felt exposed and almost humiliated, like I had been caught spying on her or something. I ran straight into Claire's room, woke her up and told her everything. I was actually in tears while I was telling her because it had scared me so badly. Claire got out of bed and we both tried to peek out the kitchen window to check, but by the time we did that, the light was off next door and there was nobody there. To give you an idea of how much this affected me, that night I slept in an old sleeping bag on the floor in Claire's room. There was no possible way I could be alone, and I felt like I wanted to board up my bathroom window forever. When we got up in the morning, Claire and I talked about it and she was concerned about Edith and her health, or more specifically her mental health, so she ended up walking over to check on her. I didn't go, but I guess she answered the door normally and was her usual sweet self. Not a single thing happened next door for the next 5 days. On the 5th night, and again pretty late at night, I woke up to bright flashing lights coming through my bathroom window. These lights were completely different and had different colors to them, so I forced myself to open the window just enough to see outside. As soon as I looked out, I could see there was an ambulance parked right in front of Edith's house with a fire truck behind it, and I could see that paramedics were inside. I stood there and watched them roll her out on a stretcher, and she definitely wasn't moving. I got Claire up immediately, and we both walked outside onto our front porch and watched them load her into the back of the ambulance and drive away. We didn't even find out what happened until days later when her son was at the house. I caught him outside when I got home from work and asked if Edith was okay, and sadly, he told me she had had a heart attack and passed away. I guess she had managed to push some kind of emergency call button, but by the time they got her to the hospital, it was too late. I still think about Edith and everything that happened all the time. It really traumatized me and it changed something in me. Never in my life have I thought the paranormal or aliens or ghosts were real, but I saw her talking to something that last night at her back door. There was something standing right on the other side of the glass that I know was not a person, and there is nothing in this world that could ever get the image of her looking over at me out of my head. The fact that she passed away only days after that has made me much more open to things beyond our understanding. It makes me think of the saying that seeing is believing, because the old me would never believe a story like this. Now that I have personally seen something so unexplainable though, I can never go back to thinking everything has an explanation. My story is going to sound crazy to most people because it's unlike any other alien encounter or paranormal experience I've ever heard of. It was a truly life-altering thing for me though, and it's something that made me question reality itself. This was more than 2 decades ago, back before everyone had a smartphone or social media, and even before the internet was a regular part of our daily lives. My best friend and I were hanging out at a downtown summer festival where there were local vendors and food and a few bands playing. We were sitting on these large concrete blocks with grass around them and just enjoying the evening when 2 girls walked over with their food and sat down right next to us. They weren't particularly striking in appearance and both of them were dressed pretty conservatively for summer, but they started up a conversation with us almost as soon as they sat down, and there was just something warm and genuine about both of them. The girl closest to me, and the one I ended up talking to the most, was named Maya, and she looked like she might have been from India. She had these incredibly expressive eyes, and when she would look at you, her irises were fully visible. You know how some people just have eyes that are hard to look away from? She had those eyes. Our conversation was all small talk first, but we ended up sitting with them for hours, and as it was getting dark out, Maya started steering our conversation into some pretty unusual territory. She was talking about how in the future, governments would track people constantly with cameras and computers that could recognize faces, and also how none of us would use cash anymore, and it would all switch to digital currency. You have to remember that this was before most people were even thinking about things like digital currency or biometric surveillance. At the time, it all sounded pretty out there to me, like the plot of a sci-fi movie, but it was still very interesting. I just figured she was the type of person who liked futuristic ideas and conspiracy theories, but then she started bringing up very specific things that were going to happen, like natural disasters and political events. I wish I would have paid more attention to the events and the dates she was talking about, but I was honestly just trying to keep up with her energy. I think she felt very comfortable with me, and I could tell we both felt a strong chemistry. Then as we were sitting closer to each other and face to face, she asked me if I wanted to know something that she had only ever told a few people. Of course I said yes, but I wasn't prepared for what she told me. She claimed to be over 80 years old. Obviously she was around our age and couldn't have been more than 20, and I remember laughing when she told me because I thought it was a joke. She said it in such a calm and serious way, though, that it created this awkward pause for a few seconds, and I really didn't know how to respond. She finally broke the awkwardness and asked me very nicely not to think of her as a crazy person. And then, that's when something happened that changed everything. She reached out and put both of her hands on my face and looked me directly in the eyes. I looked back at her and I genuinely thought she was going to kiss me, which I would have been fine with, but then she pulled me close to her and put her forehead against mine. I don't even know how to describe this, but it felt like she was literally pulling me into her consciousness. It was like the world around us faded out for a second, and all there was this overwhelming connection between us where I could feel her experiences and her thoughts and feelings like they were mine. It only lasted seconds, then she pulled away and looked at me again, and I knew. She didn't say it out loud, and she didn't have to. Somehow, through that connection, she showed me exactly who she was, and it was not one of us, not even close. What I saw happened so fast it could barely be called a glimpse, but it was more than enough to change me forever and erase any doubts I might have had about us being alone in the universe. As soon as she pulled all the way back, while still looking at me with her hands on my face, she simply said, "Now you know." Those 3 words hit me in my actual soul. I couldn't even speak. My mind was racing and screaming even, but my body wouldn't do anything I wanted it to do. I could look around and see people walking past with their kids and laughing and talking, and I knew they were completely unaware of what had just happened. It made me want to yell out to everyone, but I couldn't. Meanwhile, my friend was still casually talking to the other girl and was clueless as to what had just happened. I kept trying to force myself to move or say something to him, but it was like I was under some kind of trance. After what felt like an eternity, my friend turned to me and said we should go to the car to get our jackets. I just sat there, still totally unable to respond until he repeated himself. Then Maya looked at me again and softly said, "I guess you'd better go." That simple phrase seemed to let me go, and I was finally able to stand up, but I still didn't feel like I could say anything yet. My friend and I started walking toward the car, and with every step it was like I was slowly waking up. By the time we got to the car, which was only a couple of minutes, the feeling had lifted completely and I could speak again. The first thing that came out of my mouth was, "That girl was an alien and she did something to me." The second I heard myself say that out loud, I realized how completely insane I sounded. I expected my friend to be concerned, but instead he just burst out laughing, and I laughed with him, probably out of shock. But that 2 seconds of laughing was in slow motion to me, and while it was happening, I could feel that it wasn't something I wanted to talk about anymore, so I didn't, and that was the only thing I ever said to him about it. After grabbing our coats, we went back to where we had been sitting since we both wanted to walk around with them more, but they had left by the time we got back. The 2 of us stayed at the festival for another hour or so, and while my friend didn't really care that the girls had left, I was trying so hard to find them again. I wanted to see Maya before we left because I had massive questions and so badly wanted to talk to her more, but it never happened, and I was just left there alone, questioning just about everything. For weeks after this happened, I felt an extraordinarily deep connection to her, like she still knew what I was doing and the things I was thinking about. I don't know if this is really the right way to put it, but I missed her. Not in a romantic way, it was something else that I can't explain better than that. She was just this strong, lingering presence in the background. I also want to put this out there. My friend and I were not on any drugs or alcohol whatsoever. The only thing I had in me that night was a funnel cake and lemonade from one of the food vendors, and that is it. It's important to me to say this because I've told friends the story, and more than once I've heard that my experience sounds like a psychedelic trip. It was definitely not that. Decades have gone by, and I can still clearly hear her voice saying, "Now you know," after whatever she did to me. None of what I experienced was a hallucination, and it was not imagined. I didn't ask for this to happen, and I usually feel like an idiot whenever I tell someone the story. It's just what happened. And why it happened to me, I have no idea. The This is a story that my wife told me years ago before we were even married, and no matter how many times I try to figure it out, I can't come up with an even remotely possible explanation. It's a weird one, and I mean really weird. Right up front, there's no talk of aliens in this story. Nobody saw a UFO or something strange in the sky, at least not exactly, but what happened to her and her friends when they were younger is downright bizarre, and the fact that none of them seem to think it's a big deal makes it even crazier. She was 14 at the time and hanging out with a group of her close girlfriends at one of their houses for a sleepover. It was just a bunch of teenage girls doing what teenage girls do, talking, laughing, and staying up late. That night, they were sitting in a circle on the floor and playing Uno in her friend's bedroom, and she thinks it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. At one point during the game, all 5 of them saw a burst of quick, powerful flashes outside the window. Lightning was the first thought, but someone went over to the window and the sky was clear, so it wasn't a storm. There was also no thunder, and they didn't see any cars outside from the upstairs window, so they ignored it and just went back to playing the game. My wife doesn't think this part is important or related, but I do. Eventually, they got tired and all went to bed at the same time and in the same room with blankets, pillows, and sleeping bags on the floor. I should also note that her friend's parents were there and asleep downstairs. And then, all of a sudden, it was morning, but none of them were inside the house. All 5 of the girls woke up outside and were lying in the grass of an orange grove on the property next door. While the grove was next door, my wife tells me it wasn't exactly a short walk. This wasn't some small hobby farm. This was a real farm with acres of rows of trees. Not one of the girls had any memory of leaving the house. It was like their night ended in the bedroom, then skipped straight to the orange grove. They were all still in their pajamas, confused and disoriented, and no one had their shoes on or even a blanket. They were just there, lying under the trees together. The other strange part is that they had all woken up at roughly the same time. She tells me they got up and were asking each other how they had gotten out there, and they were trying to remember what happened, but in almost a funny way. My wife says they were even laughing about it, which seems insane to me. When they finally walked back to her friend's house, her parents were not happy. Nobody knew how they had gotten out of the house or why, and everyone had to be picked up by their parents because they got in trouble. The actual truth was, they didn't know. They genuinely had no idea what had happened, and I know my wife is telling the truth about that. She says none of them had even the faintest memory of waking up or walking out the door, and the strangest and most disturbing part to me is how they reacted afterward. They essentially just laughed it off. Even now, years later, my wife and the friends from that group that she's still in touch with will just chuckle about it like it's some odd little teenage sleepover story. That is not normal. That's not something you just brush off as random and funny. You don't go to bed in a locked house with parents home and wake up in a completely different location without some part of your brain wanting to figure out how it happened. I've talked to her about it a dozen times, and I've even asked her friends, really trying to just poke holes in the story, and every single one of them has the same blank tone about it. They acknowledge it was weird, but they act like it was harmless. To me, it feels like they were made to forget the details, or at least not to care about them. I know my wife better than anyone, and she's a light sleeper. I can't even roll over in our bed without her waking up. There is no way someone could have led or carried her out of the house, through a yard and into an orange grove in her sleep, let alone all 5 of them. There's one other thing I also think might be connected to it somehow, but I'm not sure. It's something I didn't really think much about at first, but now it makes me wonder. My wife will sometimes snore and talk in her sleep. Not all the time, but it's something she's done since we first moved in together. On more than one occasion, her talking has woken me up and I can kind of make out what she's saying. I'll usually just wake her up, but a few times I've heard her say the phrase, "take me home," or ask the question, "will you take me home?" It's something along those lines anyway. She doesn't say it in a scared or bad dream kind of way, it's just her normal speaking voice, but it is a weird thing to hear her say, especially since I've heard the same phrase come out of her mouth a few separate times. I've told her she does this, but she never remembers what she's dreaming about, so who knows, maybe it's nothing. In the end, her story has never stopped bothering me. God only knows what actually happened to them, but I wholeheartedly believe my wife. She has never and would never lie to me about anything, and to think she's making up a crazy story like this for no reason is just an impossibility in my mind.